All right, Dave.
Max.
Picture this.
All right.
You are the CEO of a major Hollywood studio. You have the power to greenlight any single movie that you want, but there's a bit of a problem.
What's that? It's 2025?
You nailed it, dude. It's 2025. Competition all over the place. We're talking prestige TV, video games with incredible storylines. You got all this YouTube content. TikTok is absolutely devouring the young kid audience that used to go to the movies so reliably.
Man, I remember when I was growing up in the 90s, it felt like all you needed to make a movie successful was slap a movie star on a giant poster, make some big explosions happen, write a couple great lines of dialogue, and you'd get audiences lining up around the block.
Yeah. People would line up to hear one-liners, and now they just sit at home. They're not even just watching the actual movie. They're on their phone. They're on their iPad. They're petting their dog. You have to find a way to get their attention. You gotta create content so compelling that they're gonna get up off their butts, get in their car, drive to the movie theater, sit down in a theater full of strangers. How on earth are you gonna do it?
The pressure's never been higher for someone in that position right now.
So on today's show, that's the big question that we're asking. How do you do it? And if you were the boss, what would you decide to say yes to? And what movies would you be like, ain't no way my studio's gonna make that? Let's do the numbers.
Welcome to Picture This, the podcast where we examine the weekly movie box office and ask, what do movie-going trends say about our American culture?
Yeah, we're wondering about what our country loves and what it despises, about our culture's curiosities, and sometimes just about luck and cruel god of fate.
But mostly, we love movies. Movie-going is a special, enjoyable, and uniquely American pastime that we are dead set on celebrating.
My name is Max. I am the son of an independent movie theater owner and a screenwriter who's been in the business for about 20 years.
And I'm David. I've also worked in and around the movie business over the last 10 or so years in both the development side and the marketing side.
But today we're going to pretend like we and you at home have full control over a movie studio's production slate, and we're going to ask, what would you make? Passion projects? Franchises? Business-minded choices? Or are you more of a movie fan and just going to do what you want to do?
Love it.
And really, the question behind the question is, how do we save movie theaters? How do we save the movie-going experience, movie making, and the movie business? Dave, as you know, the state of the business is not super strong.
We're not still ideal. It's not ideal right now.
We know by looking at numbers in the past that we used to be selling a lot more movie tickets. People used to be going, and it gets harder for movie theaters to stay open. It gets more challenging to spend money to make movies. A lot of this came out of the COVID lockdowns. We lost a lot of movie theaters there. People changed their movie-going habits. But even before then, the attendance was slowing down.
So we're recording in early June 2025. You and I have been talking about this issue with movie theaters for months and months, going on years.
Yeah.
I will say, I've been reading in the trades just in the last, week or two that, Memorial Day was such a great weekend at movie theaters. And, I think we just saw Tom Cruise's Mission Impossible and Lilo and Stitch. We're seeing some big numbers there. Does that kind of undercut what our thesis is a little bit? Or?
Well, 2025, our analysis on 2025 is a little bit, it's kind of inaccurate because, as we all know, movie going in the summer and in, around Christmas time is where a large portion of the year's money is made. So we could have all these disastrous forecasts, but they kind of aren't super accurate.
Yeah, and I think also hearing what the trades are saying in the last 2 weeks and how great the Memorial Day weekend was, it also feels very reactive because I think 6 weeks ago we were hearing in the trades that, again, how terrible the movie business is. But I think you've done a lot of research, not just in the last 1 week to 3 weeks to 4 weeks, but I think you looked into some numbers going way back all the way to 2022, something like that.
I had an OCD moment or an ADHD moment, and it lasted for about 12 hours. Where where I dug through a lot of the data on Box Office Mojo and, some questionably accurate data on Wikipedia about, the budgets for movies and how much they made and all this stuff. And I made an Excel sheet. So, Dave, why don't you pop that open real quick?
My God, this is so scarily organized in a beautiful way, but I'm a little intimidated by it, I have to say.
Yeah, so we'll put a link to this in the notes so you could play around with this, but I did about like the top 50 to 75 movies between 2022 and currently what we got in 2025. And I sorted them by kind of their major genre. Action, adventure, animated family movie, horror movie, and all that stuff. And then I have a whole category about whether or not they were successful. Again, these are kind of vague guesses based upon reported budget numbers and grosses and our guesses on what they spent on marketing and all this other stuff.
Shout out to you, Max, for putting together a lot of info. This is awesome.
Well, weirdly, the pleasure was all mine. Anyhow, what this does tell us, it gives us some interesting food for thought about kind of the state of the movie business. And essentially what it's really telling us are what genres are more successful and more sure bets than others. And when we're talking about, if you're the CEO of a movie studio and creating your ideal slate, I think a lot of the assumptions that you might have about what's a sure bet and what's not might be super accurate, might be super obvious, or it might be kind of a little bit of a surprise. In 2025, down a little bit. And I don't know if that means the movies aren't as good, or if the big money makers haven't come out yet, or kind of what it's saying about the American public's attitude to going to the movies. But like you said, that's kind of changing. We saw insane numbers over Memorial Day, like an insane number of people who showed up to the movie theater. So for some folks, maybe they're just waiting for the one they want to go see.
Yeah, it's there was a study done a couple of months ago that said like the average American moviegoer goes to about 5 or 6 movies a year. And after working in marketing for a studio, a lot of those movies are already spoken for. If you're a general audience goer and there's a James Cameron movie coming out, you're likely going to see that one. If there's the one Tom Cruise movie coming out that year, you're likely going to see that. So that's already 2 slots of the total 5 slots of your average moviegoer is already reserved for those giant movies. So then if you're not one of those giant movies, the goal in marketing and just movie making in general, and as this fictitious Hollywood studio head honcho that you are on this episode, how do you make the movies that will deliver and to be one of those other 3 slots in their yearly commitment to the movie theater? And I think Max and I would also want to say, can we expand that? Can we be the head studio to get somebody to go see 8 movies in theaters a year?
I'm going to put a number into your head, right? So I've broken down movies that were like massive successes, moderate successes, failures, massive bombs, and then some that are questionably successful.
Okay.
And in 2022, so here's an interesting number, right? The ratio of successful films to possible failures was about 2.5 to 1, or like a little bit. It was like 2.7 to 1. In 2023 and 2024, in 2023, it dropped all the way to 1.8, and in 2024, it dropped to 1.6. But what it says is there's a possible loss of trust in moviegoers leading into 2025. Now, there were a lot of smaller movies that were successful in 2024 or just modestly successful, so that number was actually high, so maybe that doesn't mean anything. But if we're talking about like movie attendance being down in 2025, it could be because audiences over the last 2 years compared to 2022, when they were so excited to get out and go back to the movies because they've been locked in their homes. If they're making movies that are letting audiences down, that they're kind of uninspired by, if it's franchise burnout, if it's superhero burnout and all that other stuff, then maybe they're just not super jazzed to go to the movies. And maybe part of what our mission should be moving forward is finding out a way to make people excited to go to the movie theater by just making movies that are original and different and interesting. There is some data to suggest that in 2025, but honestly, Memorial Day weekend, this big, huge weekend, Minecraft being a huge hit this year, also suggests that like maybe that's not the case. So it's hard to say.
Yeah. And then, Max, I did a little research on just not nearly as much of a deep dive as you did, but I did do a little research on the Oscars over the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah, like what? So that's something I didn't get into was like prestige movies and and kind of the place that they're occupying in our culture. Like, what are you finding there?
Yeah, I mean, Max, your research, I think, focused mostly on those wide release films that most studios are trying to release to get in front of the biggest, broadest audience possible. And then
Definitely, it was like very focused on the top 50 movies, and I would go a little bit below that to find like some of the movies that were like massive bombs. So I wanted to make sure that those outliers were included. But yeah, I mean, some of those Oscar movies, and like, correct me if I'm wrong here, are probably below that top 50 threshold, right?
Absolutely. I'll keep it light. I don't have anything as fancy as Max's chart, but I think a good snapshot for me was in the year 2000. Gladiator won Best Picture, which starred Russell Crowe and was directed by Ridley Scott, one of the great mainstream filmmakers. And that won Best Picture and also did well over $100 million domestically and was a great global success as well. And around that time, the mid-90s, the late 90s, the early aughts, there was an agreement between the Oscars and the mainstream audiences where it was possible to get a film nominated for an Oscar and make a whole bunch of money and have people want to go see it. And what I found in more recent years at the Oscars is, most recently this year, a movie like Anora won Best Picture, and it's an excellent movie done by a really talented filmmaker who started making really scrappy movies. The first one he made was on his iPhone, and he's really come a long way over the last couple of years. Really incredible, great performances, and that movie made under $20 million and won Best Picture. That is a huge difference from the days of Gladiator, with the exception of last year. So the 2024 Oscars and the movie Oppenheimer won. The exception that's proven my rule, but that movie made almost $1 billion, was like that old school success. But outside of Oppenheimer, over the last 10 years, we're talking about movies like Parasite, Moonlight, Anora, Nomadland. These movies, like, my cousin know these movies at all, and that's been the trend. If you take out a movie like Oppenheimer out of that, over the last 10 years, it's feast or famine. It's movies like Minecraft, which will open to $115 million, or an artsy-fartsy movie like Anora will come out. So it's an interesting time for movie
Anora
going.
the other thing is interesting. Like, Anora took a long time to make $20 million. It took, and it was kind of an exception to the rule. Like, after it started picking up award steam, A24 pumped a lot of marketing dollars into it to increase viewership. So, but I think it had something like, it probably took close to 6 months to make $20 million.
And now you're speaking on something that I know we'll talk about on this podcast as well. Different from when, the early, aughts, there were movies that would be in theaters for multiple weeks and months in a row. Now, because of the rise of streaming, there is a lot of pressure to get those movies out of the theaters and get them to your TV screen at home. So audiences don't even have to get off their butts. And I think to bring it back to the point of our podcast today about being about arranging your own movie slate as a studio head, do you want to use some of your equity to make a movie like Anora that you hope will break out? Do we want to take some chances on an oddball film or a film by unique filmmakers, and maybe it'll break through? Another example of that's a little different, but you could say, is that Ryan Coogler's Sinners, which right now, as of June, it's made over $250 million worldwide, and is now, most people are saying it's one of the movies of the year, might get nominated. However, on paper, when the movie was being greenlit, as a big-time studio head, a lot of people had questions if a vampire movie with racial tensions and a period piece drama first hour was going to make any money. But that's an example of it playing off.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And that movie breaks so many rules. It has an extremely long Act 1, which studios will not even let you do if you're a new person. Big cast, expensive, original film. We're going to do a whole episode on that because it's super fascinating. But to answer your question, I'm going to start you off with a question.
Okay.
Because on the third tab here, and don't look at it yet.
Okay, not looking, but there's a third tab.
There's a third tab where I essentially broke things down by genre to measure their likelihood of success. These are essentially the main genres that exist in the box office right now. So there's superhero movies, Then there are like other action adventure movies, and these could be anything from like franchises like Indiana Jones or, smaller Jason Statham movies. Then we have family movies, which are mostly animated films. There are a couple of family films that I would consider like not animated, like the reboot to Little Mermaid, and some similar stuff like that. But animated or family films are kind of their own space. Then we have comedies, very traditional genre. We have rom-coms, very traditional genre. Horror and thriller movies, staple. I have broken a bunch of films up into just dramas, regular dramas, although this is one that has the most variance because it can include period pieces, it can include romances, it could include mysteries. But there are films where I would say the primary focus is kind of a non-comedic relationship between the main characters. Then we have a kind of an emerging genre, which is like Christian event films.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have musicals, which I'm including like concert films, biopics like the Whitney Houston biopic or the Bob Marley biopic. And then obviously traditional musicals like things like Wicked. And we have some mystery movies, murder mystery movies. We have a couple of like anime releases and adult animation, and then some sci-fi fantasy for adults. And I include things like Everything Everywhere All at Once, Mickey 17, 3,000 Years of Longing. These films that are kind of like the sci-fi fantasy films that aren't animated family films. Okay, so now that I've laid out all of the different genres.
Okay.
Just off the top of your head, without talking about, which ones are profitable or not. Just your sixth sense as a guy who's been around and as a guy who's been curious about this stuff. If you have 10 movies, which types of movies, what genres are you making? Don't think too hard, go.
Okay, and Max, I think you listed off somewhere around like 13 like total genres, and I'm going to pick my 10. I think I might double up on a couple of those genres. Here I go. I'm going to do 2 superhero movies. I know that might be a hot take because lately those superhero movies are a bit risky. I'll do 2 animated family movies. I'm going to do 2 horror thriller movies. Wow, I'm really doubling up. Okay, so that's 6 movies so far. And then I'm going to do 1 drama, 1 rom-com, 1 comedy, and 1 sci-fi fantasy for adults.
Okay, cool. Okay, so real quick, if you had to guess which of those genres that you picked has the most bombs, massive money losers, what would you guess it is?
Well, first I will say, Max, I regret everything I just said a couple seconds ago, but I'm going to stick to it. But I would actually guess that, is it the sci-fi fantasy for adults that has the biggest bombs?
Biggest bombs? Okay, so crack open that third tab.
Okay, open up the third tab. First one I'm looking at, superhero.
The number of massive successes, which is a movie that makes more than $100 million for a studio, and then the total number of bombs, the movies that lose more than $100 million, is there are 9 massive moneymakers to 11 bombs, which means the percentage ratio is less than 1.
That's not good.
Now let's look at all the other genres, right? So like, are there any other genres that have that ratio? Action adventure? No. Animated family? No. Comedies? Weren't any massive bombs.
Okay, got it. Because it's lower risk,
comedies
right?
In the later. It's lower risk, smaller budgets, but also there's just not that many of them. Mm-hmm. Rom-coms, no bombs. Dramas, there are a couple massive bombs there.
Yeah.
Right. So that ratio is like 5 to 8, which is worse than the superhero one. Horror thrillers?
Big success.
Look at this. 18 to 0 massive money makers to bombs. And we'll get into horror in a sec, because that stuff's outrageous. Christian event films.
Also,
kind of a similar
Christian
ratio.
event films are super successful, Max. That's crazy.
That's a whole secret thing there. Musicals, 3 to 1. Only one of them was like a massive bomb, so those are pretty reliable. Mystery films, kind of non-event. Animated adult animation, kind of no massive films, no bombs. And then the sci-fi fantasy, you were right, it's the lowest.
Ooh.
It's 1 massive film and 2 giant bombs.
It's rough. That's rough stuff. But I did pick. I might be in the hole right now because of the superhero. I might be thinking outdated with a little 2018 mentality. It's not like it used to be.
It's not like it used to be. They're riskier. Still have a lot of successes, right? So you still have a bunch of massive money makers, but it is, it's a bit of a gamble.
Max, are you going to tell us yours?
So obviously I cheated a little bit here, right? Because I already knew the data. You made some good choices, like the animated family movies are very sure bets. You had 2 horror thrillers. Those are very sure bets. But if I was running a studio now, here's what I would do. 0 superhero films.
Whoa.
They're played out. It's not that they don't have value. They might, I mean, the amount of money that they do make, when they do make money, they might still be technically the most valuable, but I don't want to deal with the bombs. So where I'm going to put my big money, like my high budget films, I'm going to make 2 animated family films, which you chose 2. I think that was a good choice. One of them is going to be like a talking animals comedy, and then the other is going to be like some sort of original fairy tale, like, you know, how Pixar, they're essentially fairy tales. And I'm going to put like, those are going to be big budget movies, $100 million movies, $200 million movies, because the return on those is massive. They're not like sure bets, but the ratio of massive films to bombs is 20-7. The success rate to failure rate is 13-6. Like, it's very high. And a large reason for that is, you know, if kids want to go see a movie, their parents are probably going to go with them and buy tickets. So you're selling twice as many tickets, or a lot of additional tickets whenever they're released.
Yeah, big groups, yeah.
The other sure bets are horror movies. Now, horror movies are insanely popular. Like, and I knew this, but when I did the numbers, it was even just more stark. Like, the number of horror movies that made studios probably more than $100 million were like 18, and the number that lost $100 million was 0, because they don't cost that much money. You can never lose that much money making a horror film. They're just not that expensive. Even Sinners, which if you even consider it a horror film, which I kind of don't, it only cost $90 million. So it was just, the risk is a lot lower.
But I would argue that that movie is expensive for a horror movie. But I think to your point of like, the movie is kind of a horror movie, but also you could also call it kind of an action adventure movie too. And in that light, it's very in line with the other types of action adventure movies. So that feels like more the exception than the rule. But and then one that's really paying off. Yeah.
But if you want people to leave their house and go see a movie, you gotta have horror movies on your slate.
Agreed.
Even the ones that aren't making $100 million, there's still a success rate that's 7 times higher than the failure. So people will just show up for these. Even if it's, you know, it only makes $20 million or $40 million gross, you're still seeing money going into the coffers. So I'm going to put 4 of those on. And I'm going to have one of them be a slasher film, one of them be supernatural, like a ghost story or, you know, something like that. One of them's going to be a horror comedy, because horror is it's permeated so large now. It has some meta, self-aware stuff, and people really enjoy laughing in those as well. I think Monkey was a big hit this year. That was supposed to be very, very funny.
Yeah.
And then I love little thrillers, even if they're not that good, like a person caught in the building with somebody trying to kill them, or somebody stalking me, something like that. Those movies are still money makers, and I would put one of those in my slot.
Nice. So more heavy on horror. Got it.
Heavy on horror, animated family, and then I'm gonna make a musical.
Wow, you're going musical. Are you wicked pilled? Is that why? Are you just like drinking the wicked Kool-Aid and you're like, I'm gonna make the next reinvention of Oz? No. What are you?
I mean, dude, you look at, if you're talking like movies that can win Best Picture, that can make over $100 million, that are also based on very popular IP, whether it's Wicked or Willy Wonka or Chicago or, like, you know, any of these ones that have been a big deal in our culture. Like, yeah, I think they are sure bets. I imagine they're pretty difficult to get off the ground because there's a lot of technical, you have to get the rights, and they're very specific. You have to find people that can sing and dance and all that other stuff. But America, we love our musicals, so I would put a big bet on that. And, you know, looking at the data here, they're lower risk than a lot of these other genres. But, you know, at the end of the day, Dave, I'm still a movie nerd, and I want to make my special movies.
What's special to you? So you got, right now you have 3 more slots left in your 10 movie slate. What are you gonna do?
So, I'm gonna make a low budget comedy. And we have seen people, the comedy success rate is in the toilet. It's very, very bad. And, you know, I think a lot of the forecast on this is somewhat inaccurate, because there is a lot of comedy in superhero movies. There is a lot of comedy in horror films. It's just kind of existing in other genres. But like a straight comedy, like a straight summer comedy like we used to see, those movies are pretty fucking risky. Like hovering just above 50% success rate, arguably a little less. But we did see this movie come out this year called One of Them Days. Yeah. It was like a low budget, I think like $10 or $15 million movie. It grossed around 50, and it was just like 2 leads, a very funny concept about them having one of the worst days that they could possibly have. And it was just a clean, good idea. And I would like one of those in my slate. I think even if you don't make a lot of money initially, it does a lot to counter program. It gives people reason to get out who normally wouldn't go. I am trying to increase reasons for people to go to the movie theater. So I do think we got to take some risks and do some broad programming.
Yeah, I think that the argument against comedies nowadays, because of all the different forms of engagement and entertainment, unlimited streaming options, Netflix in general just pumping out a lower budget comedy show that hits your service every week, plus platforms like TikTok and Instagram and other social media platforms that give you bite-sized bits of comedy that has sort of like chipped away at the theatrical experience. However, I think Max are also from and I are from a generation where seeing a comedy in a theater full of strangers when everyone's laughing is a singular awesome experience.
Yeah, it's so different. And like we are inundated essentially by sketch comedy on social media all day long, every day. But that's not narrative comedy. And that's not laughing in a room full of strangers. You know, it's ironically like things like stand-up and live comedy are still very popular, but the actual like summer comedy movie isn't. Nobody's cracked the code on it, but I think it's a potential market, and it would behoove studios to explore that, you know, in the $10 million budget high concept range that one of them days really figured out.
Totally, and that's a great comp for it. There is still success to be had there.
Right. Now, adjacent to that is actually like something that people consider, I think generally pretty risky, but if you run the numbers, they're just not, which is the rom-com. And I don't know why these movies just kind of stopped being made at a certain point, but I don't know if they ever stopped making money. Because since 2022, there's only been like a total of like 7 of them. One of them seems to be a bit of a failure. 4 of them seem to have made money. And one of them was actually like a massive hit, like it made over $100 million. And that was the most recent one with Glenn Powell's Sydney Sweeney.
Yeah, Anyone But You, which was Sleeper hit. And a movie that came out over Christmas, I want to say 2 years ago. And the initial weeks were okay, but not blockbuster, not great results. And unlike what we were talking earlier, the studios and the theaters decided to leave the movie in the movie theaters longer than you might expect. I think that's a little bit because the movie was released by Sony, and Sony doesn't have one of those streaming services so the desire to want to,
right?
Yeah, so that the initial desire from another studio that does have a streaming service like Universal that has Peacock and Warner Brothers that has HBO Max, all of those giant entities have an impetus to want to take it out of theaters if they don't think it's doing well enough, and then put it on your streaming service to get it to audiences at home. Sony, I think one of the reasons this movie worked is that Sony, because it doesn't have their own version of that, they were willing to see the potential in the long-term play, and they left it in theaters for weeks. And incredibly unusual, I think week 4 and 5 of the release of that movie was more successful than weeks 1 and 2.
Yeah, so you're making a really strong case for extending that release window, letting word of mouth spread. Yeah, it's just not something that we do enough of these days. And if you're doing just enough business, don't give it away for free. Don't give it away for free. Don't throw it on a streaming platform. Like let people find it. Let people enjoy it. Let people start gossiping about it on social media. It will go a long way. And like the rom-com formula, it's so easy. It's just like hot people in some sort of like fantasy wish fulfillment setting. You don't have to spend a ton of money on it. And we don't have a lot of that. You know, like superhero movies should be sexy, but they're not. Action adventure, like even like the romance in Dune is like so unsexy and boring that like it's not really the point of it. It's like political romance. That's obviously true. You know, animated and family movies, there's like fairy tale romance. That's its own thing, but it's not fulfilling that thing where, I mean, there's a massive, massive amount of people in this country who read romance novels or like young adult novels, and they're not really served in the big screen, and there's just no reason for it. So I would put a lot of money into that. And then the last thing is I would take a big risk on some sort of prestige drama. And now that could be something, you know, cool, like a Sinners or an Everything Everywhere All at Once. Maybe it's very high concept, or maybe it's like based upon a popular book. Movies like dramas that were based on books performed extremely well. So if there's like a hot book property out there, I think that's totally worth investing your money in, kind of like regardless of the genre. You know, especially if you only have to spend between $20 and $50 million making the movie. I would also be into like making a period piece or some adult sci-fi or like a murder mystery. I would even be willing to take a bigger risk expecting to lose money on this, just to have something into the Oscars, something for people to come home and be really proud of if we had like a really awesome script.
That's great.
I want to make one of those. I can't not make one of those.
Okay, Max, that was quite the exercise. And again, I'm so impressed with the amount of data that you put into one document. My eyes are crossed because I can barely understand looking at this. I don't even know how you put it all together. I'm impressed.
The gift of ADHD medication, which is amphetamines. It's scrolling through this thing right now. It is funny to look at it and be like, what happened here, buddy? But yeah. Well, thank you.
It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. But yeah, so we both put together our slate of 10 films, and we picked the genres of each of our films. And I think we're with the thesis of like, these are the types of movies that we hope we're going to get people to go back into the movie theater and see these out of their house in a dark room with a bunch of strangers. But I think taking a pause, since we are not the heads of movie studios, unfortunately, asking you, Max, like, of the studios that are out there now, both big and small, but specific to those that are putting movies in theaters, what studio do you think is doing it best? And I guess that criteria is like, what studio has the best slate to get, in your eyes, to get the most amount of people excited about going back to the theater?
You know, I'm super split on this. Unfortunately, I got my cynical answer and I got my super optimistic answer. And I think technically they're both right. The people who are getting the most butts in the most seats, even though they also have the most massive bombs, is unquestionably Disney.
Oh,
Disney
wow.
owns Marvel, Disney owns Pixar, Disney owns Star Wars. And, you know, if you look at Lilo and Stitch, which even Moana 2, I mean, these are two movies that they had test screened and were like, maybe we should just release this directly to our platform because they don't seem to be that good. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the user reviews on like Letterboxd, like, I mean, these movies aren't hated, but people didn't think they were good. You know how much money those movies made?
That's true.
If you just look at ticket sales alone, it's kind of unquestionable that Disney is getting people to go to the movie theater, and to ignore their model would be silly. It just would be silly.
But all right, counter to that, and maybe it's a rephrasing of the question, which is, and valid point, Max, Disney is getting people to go to the movie theaters very successfully. Do you like the movies that they're getting people to go see, though?
Here's the tail end of that cynical answer, is that, you know, the Lilo and Stitch success really depends on a couple of things. One, just the fact that a lot of the people who are bringing those kids to their movies are the ones who watched the original one, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter if it's good or not. They just, you know, it's familiar, it sounds fun. It's like a kind of not a home run, but it's a guaranteed success for making the family happy.
Yeah.
Even if it's going to cost you, you know, with all 4 tickets and popcorn and all that stuff, like $100, $150 to do it.
Oof.
But it's just like, hey, this is going to be one of our 5 this year. But that kind of bums me out because it's not one of those things that means that's going to encourage the parents to go on a date to the movies. Mm-hmm. It's not going to encourage the husband to go see an action film with the boys or the wife to go see a rom-com with the gals. It really is kind of creating and perpetuating this culture of we only go to 5 or 6 movies a year because when we go, we're going to spend a lot of money. We're not going to love the film, but we're going to have a good time. And I don't know. I mean, I think Disney's got a long runway to keep making money this way. But it also feels like a slow deterioration of culture that sadly Disney was a big part in building. So my optimistic answer is actually like, if I was to really run a studio, I'd want to run an A24. And that kind of goes counter to the picks that I made because I was making business decisions. But what A24 has done, you know what's crazy about A24 is it has a brand as a studio. The only other studio that has a brand, well, not the only other, but like Disney, like Warner Brothers, Universal, Paramount, Fox don't really have movie brand studios.
100%. And we're gonna talk about this in future episodes, especially because I have a marketing background and I know Max is so involved in it as well. But purposefully other studios don't have a brand because they want the flexibility to make both a dark horror movie and then also an animated movie for kids. So they don't want anyone to see that logo and have a predisposition on what that's going to be. Whereas A24 has totally embraced their offbeat brand in the opposite way that Disney has totally embraced their we are mainstream family fare brand.
Right. And like, you know, I guess it's a little bit of cheating because Disney owns Marvel and Marvel has a brand, and it owns Pixar and Pixar has a brand and all that other stuff. But and like technically maybe those studios all have their own brand too. But the fact that A24 has a brand, and it's not because they released one type of movie, it's because they release all sorts of different type of movies. That's unique. Like Blumhouse doesn't even have that. And even if the numbers aren't anywhere near the Disney numbers, Marvel advertised Thunderbolts by saying, we have the director of an A24 movie and the editor of an A24 movie and the cast members of A24. They tried to market against their own brand and pretend like Thunderbolts was an A24 film, even though it clearly wasn't, to encourage people to get out to do it. And that's really incredible. Yeah. And I think it interests a variety of different people and makes movie going interesting and fun and part of the cultural conversation in a way that is very important. And if I was to run a studio, I'd want to run one like that for that reason.
Applaud. Well done. I love that answer. I love it. I will commandeer it and I will combine both of Max's answers, which I think Max is cheating because he didn't answer two studios in opposite directions.
Super unfair.
Super unfair. But I will answer to the rules, which are rules, frankly, that we just created. But I would say the combination of what Max's two choice, which ultimately I think is Warner Brothers. To Max's point, you're right. Warner Brothers on its own, because it's doing different things, probably doesn't have a brand in its own right. However, I think the two heads of Warner Brothers right now are these two people, Mike DeLuca and Pam Abdi. They have been in the movie business for a very long time, working at different studios, working as producers and creative people, but also as the studio execs and the honchos. But I think the proof points this year are that they did do the Minecraft movie, which I'll in air quotes will say like is the Disney play, which is a broad audience and a star Jack Black to make it as broad and family-friendly adventure movie as possible, and succeeded. And in 3 weeks, they released the most auteur type of film you can make for a mass audience, which is this movie Sinners that we mentioned, which was directed by this incredible filmmaker Ryan Coogler, with an incredible movie star Michael B. Jordan, with some very challenging material. And now, as of June, it's easy to look back on and say like, oh yeah, what a great success. But that was also a real risk.
I would say it was a massive risk. And the fact that they pulled it off with massive payoff, I think to your point, is a very compelling reason to want to emulate how they're running that studio.
Totally. And then to come, they have a couple other movies coming out later this year, but the big ones are Superman in July, which is, again, more of the Disney Marvel type of play. Of course, this is DC, but that is another broad 4-quadrant, get everyone in the United States, everyone in the world to try to see that movie, as well as the next movie by Paul Thomas Anderson, which is going to be unusual and has a weird trailer. And it does star Leonardo DiCaprio, who many argue is one of the last true movie stars. But he's got a weird mustache and he's got a weird wardrobe, and he is not in the trailer and the marketing materials. He's not super handsome Leo. He is weird kooky Leo. And I think the fact that that's a studio as mainstream as you can get, doing both mainstream fare and then also really challenging art fare, that's the studio that I would most want to emulate and hope that people are excited about going back to movie theaters. I think it's an incredible balance, and I hope they find a lot of success this year. So that's my pick.
It's kind of a traditional way things have been done, and it's like very hopeful that it's working for them, because I feel like that traditional model was not working for a long time. So if they figured out how to get back to it, where it's like a couple of big movies, take a risk on a couple of art house movies, it all balances out, and we have a really great slate and a really great library, that's just good for the movie business long term. So I think it's a really good choice.
Love it.
So obviously, we have thoughts on all this, but we really want to hear yours too. So, hit us up on the socials or email us. We'll put our contact and all that into the show notes, and send us what your movie slates would be. We're going to share the spreadsheet with you. You could poke around on it, but what kind of studio would you run? What kind of movies would you finance? Don't even worry about the business mind thing. We just want to know what interests you the most and how that would manifest if you were the CEO of a big-time movie studio.
Play the role for a bit. As a wrap-up, we're going to do this at the end of every episode. Max and I are each going to share one movie that we're excited to see in the next week or so, and tell you a little bit why. And then we're also going to share one thing that we're excited and encouraging you not to do instead of going to the movies. This world we're getting busier and busier, and we're getting more and more distracted. There's more and more other things to do. So what we're here, of course, to encourage us to be going to the movies more. There's things that we all should be doing less of. So Max, you want to kick off the inaugural wrap up?
So I think that if you were to pick one thing to see this month in theaters, I would pick Friendship. This is it's a hard comedy. They're rare in movie theaters, and audiences are going bananas over it. They're saying it's super, super funny. People are going in large crowds. It's a bit unusual, so it's something special. It's not something that you've seen before, and that's a damn good reason to get out of the house.
I love that.
And we miss this, right? And one thing that you should definitely not do, one thing you shouldn't spend your time doing, is getting on YouTube and reading all sorts of diet advice. I am bombarded with whatever apple cider vinegar, grapeseed oil diet I should be on. That means that some of you are out there just spending countless hours trying to figure out how to maximize your efficient gut health, digestion with a bunch of just fake information. Don't do that. Go to the movies instead. Go see Friendship.
That's dumb. We are health positive on Picture This, but you don't need a YouTube playlist of 87 hours to get to the bottom of it. I'll say the movie that I'm excited about in the next week or so is The Materialists, which is directed by this woman, Celine Song. She did this movie that came out a little bit ago called Past Lives, which got some critical acclaim. And this is what Max and I were talking about earlier. It is a rom-com, a pretty, you could call it traditional rom-com, with the it boy of the moment, Pedro Pascal, Dakota Johnson, Chris Evans, and a will they, won't they story. I'm excited for it. For two dudes talking about it on a podcast, it sounds so traditional and old-fashioned, but check out the trailer. It looks actually very modern and very interesting, and this type of director will bring something special to it. I promise. So I'd encourage you guys to go see that. Max and I will be at the movies. The one thing I'd encourage you not to do is go down the rabbit hole of this social media disagreement of one gorilla versus 100 men, who would win. Who cares? We don't need this information. Don't put yourself in a position where you're battling a gorilla with 99 other people. It's dumb. It's really dumb. Instead, go to the movies. Go enjoy some premium theatrical experience.
Yeah, not a worthwhile thought experiment. Go to the movies instead.
Love it.
All right, y'all. Well, thanks for joining us this week. Be sure to send in those slates. We want to know what you would make if you were boss. And until next week, we'll see you at the movies.
See you at the movies.